What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there and it's free. That enables us to keep coming to y'all as often as possible with as many interviews as possible. So please hit that subscribe button, like our content, share it, talk about it, be about it, each one, teach one, and we appreciate your support. And if you haven't already, of course, right next to subscribe is join. You can become a member of Unique Access Entertainment. Now, today we have a very special guest. We have the honor and privilege of being joined by Robin Rue Simmons. Thank you for coming through.
So happy to be here, Soren. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's definitely an honor, and got to shout out our good mutual friend Jahi Allah for connecting us. And I've known Jahi since the 90s. He's always coming through for me, and he's done it yet again to connect me with Robin. So thank you both so much. Robin has, for those who haven't been noticing or haven't seen, been doing a lot of work, very important work in the community, not only in Evanston, where she's from, Evanston, Illinois, and throughout Illinois, but also nationally with the reparations movement, which has led me to so many things that I'm excited to talk with Robin about today. So at this point, if I understand correctly, you're still the chairman, or the chairperson, I should say, of the City of Evanston Reparations Committee. So in that role currently, what does that encompass?
So that's right. I retired from my elected role in 2021, and I was appointed by the mayor to continue on as a chairwoman of the committee. And what that means is I work with my colleagues on the committee. There are 7 of us, 3 elected officials, council people, and 4 community members at large. And we continue being the voice of the people to legislate, to develop the commitment, the program, to expand the fund, something we recently did just several weeks ago, increased an additional $10 million from when we first passed in 2019. So we have regular public meetings every month. They're hybrid, so everyone can come and participate and observe. And we hear from the community on what do the Black community want as repair, and figure out a viable way to actually pass these laws and fund them and disperse them. And so at this point in our work, we are dispersing our reparations benefits, and we know that it is not enough. So there's often critique about what we're doing. We recognize that it's not a settlement. The work continues. It continue until my very last day. And that's what we're doing.
Yes, a lot of work to be done. And one of the many things I'm excited to talk about is the action, making things actually happen instead of talking about them, which I think is a hallmark of your service and the work that you've been doing. But I also think it's interesting, if I understood correctly, that being a residential and commercial, or residential real estate agent and broker kind of got you on this path. So what was it about the work you were doing as a real estate broker that made you get interested in the reparations movement and doing this type of work?
So Soren, I actually have to go even back before being a real estate broker. And it was being a Black child in a predominantly white, affluent suburb of Chicago, beautiful city, known for its diversity and inclusion, but still very segregated. A community that had, at the time that I began thinking about reparations, a $50,000 household income divide between Black and white Evanstonians, a life expectancy gap of 13 years. And it was these disparities, discrepancies, racial gaps that informed all of my professional work, including real estate, knowing that home ownership is the most likely path to build wealth for any family, particularly Black families, knowing how important it is for a family to have that home base to pass on generational wealth, and sometimes just to share space for affordability's sake. I grew up in my grandparents' household primarily, and with my uncles, and I know what that family home meant for our family. And so all of that was led and informed by seeing the racial segregation in my community. And while a real estate agent and later a general contractor, I saw how much opportunity there is to build wealth, but also how many barriers, how much discrimination we were dealing with, not just in lending, but also in every area of gaining wealth through home ownership. And that is what led me to think about legislative role and running for elected office. I did that after 20 years of working in various real estate, construction, advocacy roles, working as a Black business advocate, appointed by the mayor to serve on various committees. And in 2019, I ran and won, or 17 rather, to be a councilwoman for my community, my neighborhood, the village that raised me up, the 5th Ward, the West End of Evanston, Illinois. And, the work evolved to what it is today. I didn't start out in the 90s thinking about reparations in Evanston. I thought about HR 40, which was introduced in 1989 by Rep. John Conyers out of Detroit, Michigan. I was thinking about that, but I didn't think about hyper-local approach to reparations until I was a councilwoman in Evanston and saw what was possible in that elected role, what hadn't been pursued. And I wanted to make sure that in my term, I did everything within my authority as an alderperson or councilwoman to bring change and repair for my village.
Yes. And that being said, I wanted to get your insight as someone that grew up in a house that was owned, it wasn't a rental property, and being someone in real estate, I understand you have properties yourself. So can you explain the differences you saw growing up as a child, and then as you became a teenager and then an adult, the differences that you noticed between someone that owns a house and someone that rents?
Sure. So I also had the experience of living in a home that was rented as a child. I lived with my mother early on, and we lived in rental properties. And I know what it's like even as a parent, a single parent renting before I was a homeowner, and not having a sense of place, not having equity, having to be told when you have to move, if a lease isn't going to be renewed, paying rent that's not building wealth for your family, having landlords that don't, allow deferred maintenance and don't come and do improvements and so on, not having ownership or even a voice, just even not the conditions of the property, but you have less voice even when you don't have ownership in communities and communities like Evanston as well. And so knowing that difference, knowing that paying rent and not having equity to pull out to support a child in their adult season, whether it's college or career, any sort of life circumstances, emergencies that you might not able to pull out equity there, and not being able to age in place. I could tell you how that has really impacted families where grandmother or big mother or whoever it is not able to age in place and have to downsize into living conditions that are beneath what they should have. So there are all kinds of ways that I saw in my professional work how home ownership and wealth at home in home ownership would be an important path to repair. But I'll tell you that it wasn't the reason why we led with housing in Evanston. It was because the consensus of Black Evanstonians raised up that same argument that there are so many areas of harm as it relates to redlining and predatory lending and anti-Black zoning laws and various housing policies. In Evanston, we physically had our homes moved from near the lake and other places in the community that had higher land value and moved into the Black neighborhood, where that neighborhood was later disinvested, stripped of a neighborhood school, access to healthcare, access to healthy food, poor air quality because of waste transfer stations in the community, less environmental assets, deteriorating home stock. And this is because we're Black, because we are in a nation that is really built on white supremacy. And that although there's been important laws that have passed, civil rights and even fair housing, racism is still baked into our current policy and legislative and programs today. And reparations is a way to address this. It is radically different than ordinary public policy. It is unapologetically focused on Black communities, our repair, our overall wellness. And it is the appropriate legislative action to address the over 400 years of harm in this nation, and that continues today.
Yes. And a lot of things that you're working on, we should also mention, are covered in everybody. I would highly recommend, if you haven't seen it already, The Big Payback, which you can see. It's a documentary film I thought was excellent. It's on PBS. You can find it online, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it already. So that being said, one of the things that's addressed in The Big Payback is kind of this battle and wrestling, even within the Black community in Evanston, of, oh, we should just get money. We shouldn't be forced, or you shouldn't be telling us that we should spend our money on housing or repairing our existing home, et cetera, et cetera. So why, now that you have some distance from those arguments, at least the genesis of them from your firsthand experience, why do you think it's so important to focus on housing? And then why do you think so many people, at least as presented in The Big Payback, and I've seen online and in general, just knowing people don't want to be told how to spend their money? Why is it so important for you to have initiated the reparations movement in the way that you have?
So I'll say first off that I don't disagree with a cash form of reparations. The disagreement is in what can happen at a local level and how reparations remedies are prescribed. And in the case of Evanston, it was prescribed by the Black community that we lead with housing. I agree with it completely, obviously, based on my professional background, that it builds wealth. We need to own land. We don't own land. We don't have a voice. That's the unfortunate truth. As much as tenant rights laws exist and so on, as a legislator, I have seen the influence of landowners over those that do not have it. So I agree with it. And then even thinking about the initial introduction of reparations, Special Field Order 15, 40 acres and a mule, that was based on land and confiscated land being given to Black families. So that debate is in a lot of ways a false debate. It's also not a proper example of what's happening in Evanston. It's a very small, I'm talking about a handful, less than a handful of residents in opposition. What you're seeing in the documentary is political, and it's okay, because there is a larger movement that wants cash. And so to that community that wants cash as reparations, it's completely understood. I think, and many others think, that a cash benefit form of repair that could really be reparative will come from a federal effort. It'll come from the passing of H.R. 40, the bill to study slavery and develop remedy proposals, and it'll come in a significant way with the federal government having purview on and capacity to do something of significance. Municipalities only have so much capacity to be able to repair the harms. And so we've taken a first tangible step, one that I'm really proud of, but also one that, if we did nothing else, is insufficient. So to debate on we haven't done enough, certainly we haven't done enough. We've just started dispersing. We've only committed $20 million at this point. We need to multiply that, beyond. We need to expand the commitment beyond 10 years. And perpetuity is how long we need to be doing this work. But it's a first step that this nation has been building on. So whether you agree with it or you disagree with it, what Evanston has done has inspired now over 100 municipalities to take a step towards repair, passing legislations, identifying budgets to fund the work and disperse. We now have states, like the great work that's happening in California. The city of San Francisco is doing something incredible. I understand one of their recommendations is $5 million cash benefit. And there are other cities and states that are doing more. We've seen growth in support for H.R. 40, now 217 co-sponsors and yes votes in the House, where in 2019, before we passed in Evanston, there were 65 since 1989. So we're seeing the inspiration from Evanston, and not that it's meant to be a model for every community to do exactly what we did, but it is to inspire communities to dig into their history, understand their harm report. Every city has to have its own harm report. What did it do that was anti-Black? And so many cities aren't in community states that were slave states. So they're going to be looking at their anti-Black laws. Much of it is going to be found in housing. Some communities are looking at education as a first priority. Others are looking at over-policing and police terror and police violence as a first priority. But in the case of Evanston, in my professional background, I fully support starting with housing and leading into more work.
Absolutely. And it is, as you said, the beginning stages of the process.
Mhm.
That being said, given the way our country's set up with white supremacy and a lot of the systems and strata of things, the way that they're set up, how have you found you've been able to reach out and engage, attract, and maybe change the minds of either apathetic or disinterested white people, white voters, white constituents in Evanston and elsewhere to kind of help get things moving?
Well, in Evanston, I was able to do it by holding Evanston accountable to its own values. So if we said Black Lives Matter by proclamation or resolution 200 different times, signed it, a whole big ceremony, mayor, all of that, but yet we have these sustained racial gaps, we're not doing enough. So we need to do something different. Reparations is a solution. Here's the potential projected outcomes of repair. So that was the first way to get the conversation going. The next way, Soren, I'll tell you, is a little bit frustrating, but it's a solid approach. Showing how reparations is a public benefit, it's a community benefit. Repairing the harm in the Black community uplifts the entire community, the city, therefore the state. There was a report done in 2018 that largely informed my thinking as it relates to that. It was the cost of segregation report done by the Metropolitan Planning Council. It used Chicago as a reference. It showed if it dealt with this anti-Blackness and racial segregation, it would be about a $8 billion benefit to the overall economy. There would be 100,000 more or maybe less bachelor's degrees. Black families would have $1 million more earning over their lifetimes if government just did right by Black folks. And what that does for healthy neighborhoods, healthy families, safe environments is everything, because the neighborhood violence and crime that we see is a condition of poverty is what we're seeing. And so it was a great report that I use as a model when I have to go into allied communities and say, if the moral argument didn't get you there, which it should, if justice wasn't enough, then look at what it does for the entire community. And that's been a conversation that's been very productive and allowed us to advance our conversation, successfully getting an additional $10 million, recently receiving $1 million from our some of the houses of worship in Evanston to be a companion to the work that's happening at a municipal level, and now seeing over 100 cities that have made a commitment to repair.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tremendous movement. And one thing, Robin, that I've been intrigued too is how in your mind, given how have you formulated your approach throughout your process? Because, the country, United States, is good at saying one thing and either not changing or giving lip service, like you just alluded to with Evanston, for instance. So how did you realize, understand, and then chart your course from taking these apologies or these acknowledgements, either the real ones or just surface level ones, to move into action? Where did that come from for you as a person? And how did you break through everybody talking about stuff, but then actually making it happen?
So leading from experience as a Black woman, a single mother, often being under-resourced, having to figure it out, having limited time because I'm working full-time while serving. I came into office with a solutions-only approach to leadership. That was my hashtag, solutions only. And I opened my meetings with, I understand the grievances, I understand all of that, but my goal is for us to move this conversation into action in a tangible way that we can measure it. And just staying very centered on what the goal is and not politicking, not being having too many unproductive activities, time being of the essence, and really having to maximize the time that I had to serve. I made sure that every action I had was in line with an outcome. And I use SMART goals. I'm an entrepreneur, so I was also careful that it was smart, measurable, attainable, it was timely, and it was relevant. And so those were some of the practices that I carried from my entrepreneurial life to my life of public service. And it proved effective. It proved that I was able to come into office even before evolving to thinking about reparations in 2019. In 2017, when I came in and I was able to get support grants for Black businesses in our community that had long been excluded from these opportunities because it had a revenue, split model where you had to say, for example, they gave you 100,000, you had to have 100,000 to get the 100,000, this sort of thing. Well, how does that work? You know, we don't have it. So we just have to reimagine how we do everything. And we could do it as elected leaders, especially at a municipal level where there's home rule government, and we have direct access to our constituents. They're our neighbors and our friends and family who we grew up with. We can do it. These things are possible. And eventually it evolved to, well, we can do all these other things. We can do reparations. There's no reason why we can't do reparations. We're a home rule city. It's in line with our values. We did a proclamation in 2002 that said we support reparations from the federal government. So then why don't we hold ourselves to that same standard? So for me, it wasn't okay that we held the United States government to one standard, but we didn't hold ourselves to the same standard of repairing anti-Blackness in our city. And so that's really the leading tenet of my leadership, and also collaboration. None of us is as smart as all of us. And so getting out of my own way, making sure that I connect with folks that are experts in their space, that have influence in rooms I can't get in, make sure that I work smart and wise and in a collaborative way so that I'm not the only thought that's coming into the legislation. Those were the two: leading in the fierce urgency of now, like Dr. King said, and also being collaborative, which was key in us accelerating the work that we did in Evanston.